say live yet. Doesn't say live yet. You see that? You see where it says you're live? Look on the upper. You see that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I don't believe it. I've learned not to believe it. I told you before this. I've got another thing, right? I told you because I don't believe it. So today, when you were like 5 minutes late or something because of the link, I thought technology got me. I thought that was it.
Okay, got it.
I thought they finally got me. So now what I do, I've got this down to a science. Now what I do is I go to Twitter and I'm typing it in right now. I use Twitter so much, all I have to do is press T and the whole thing pops up for me. That's how much
how young you are.
Okay, so now what I'm doing now is I don't see myself. So I don't see us live. So what that means is I've got to refresh. How do you refresh? Do you press that circle button or do you press F5?
I press that circle button.
You press the circle button. I'm going to teach you a trick. F5. F5. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I still don't see us. So I'm pressing F5 here, right?
Uh-huh.
I can only type basically with one finger. That's the way I type, right? So I'm doing this like a crazy man, like 1,000 words a minute. So now what I do is I press refresh again. I don't believe it. See, I've got 2 laptops, right? I'm like an engineer. Okay, so now what I do is I check. I'm on YouTube now also. Did you know that? I'm on YouTube also.
I can see you on YouTube. I think you're live.
Really? Okay, so hold on for a second. So now what I do is I'm going to go here. Nancy, you see this? You see what I'm doing? Nancy can vouch for what I'm doing. So, you know what? I've got good news for you. I give the laptop to Nancy. Nancy's here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Smart man.
Thank you so much. You know what I do now? Because you haven't seen these yet before. You know what I do now? What do you think I do now?
You let her run the show.
I turn down the music.
Oh.
Well, you liked my music, right? You liked it.
It was pretty good. I don't know what it is, but it sounds good.
It's a meditational chant.
Oh, okay. Got it. Interesting.
It's called the Medicine Buddha, and you chant it for yourself, for your own benefit, or for that of others. And it really does have an impact on people's lives. So it's beautiful, and it goes. I discovered it actually one night. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it down, right? I can turn it down. We could spend 2 hours on here on Twitter, right? Just listening to this. That's how calm it is, right? But I'm going to turn it down. You know what, Donovan? You know what? You know what? We're live. We did it.
I'm proud of you.
Excellent. I'm excited about this because you're awesome. And I wanted to have a chance to share your awesomeness with everybody else, right? We spent some time, I guess, about a month ago now, right? It was about a month ago.
Yep.
And when I left there, Nancy and I, we looked at each other. We always look at each other. So that part wasn't unusual, right? But, and we were like, he's awesome. And I've heard what you do because I know what you do with workforce development. And I want to tell that story because I think that story is awesome. And I don't think enough people hear it. So we're going to talk about that. Yep. What do you think about that? Now, Janan Glasgow's here. She says something very important. You know what she said? I have M&Ms after every single one of these. It's my ritual. That's what I do. It's like my reward to myself, right? I'm like one of those zoo animals, and I'm like, I'm good. I get a carrot. That's what I do. So yes, Janan, thank you so much for being here. And Donovan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very excited about this. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself? Would that be all right?
Yeah, sure. I am Donovan Richards, the newest Queensborough president. And it's been a long journey to get here. I come from Queens, born and bred. I was born to teenage parents. I'm very proud, actually. A fun fact is my father migrated here from a place called Jamaica, not Jamaica, Queens, but Jamaica, the island. He just became a citizen 2 years ago. And so actually last year, Adam, my election was the first election he actually was able to vote for it vote in his lifetime in.
Oh my God.
And I'm his namesake. So he's Donovan Senior, I'm D2, and then my son is D3. So, we've lived in Queens our entire lives. They were teenage parents. So as you can imagine, we bounced around from neighborhood to neighborhood. I can't tell you how many neighborhoods we lived in across Queens, but all across the southern portion of Queens. And then, fast forward in 2013, 2003, a close friend of mine was unfortunately murdered in Southeast Queens, and that led me to getting engaged in public service. And I had no idea that I would ever be in politics, in all honesty, but I was up at Con Edison working at this engineering firm when I came home from school. Not that I ever wanted to be an engineer, just to be honest, but it paid the bills at the time, and I was learning a lot. And then the folks up at Con Edison were like, wait a minute, we like you. Why don't you go back to school for engineering? And I'm like, okay. So I almost went that route until my friend was killed in November of 2000, March of 2003. Wow. And I ended up going to a meeting on gun violence after a church service. I was actually probably went to the club the night before I went to church. So I was trying to stay awake, actually. I remember that. And then they announced this meeting after service that would be led by a local city council member and an organization called Mothers Against Guns. And I went, and I'm the youngest guy there. And they're like, well, young people don't have access to guns. And I'm like, well, at 13 years old, one of my friends, not actually 14, one of my friends had a gun. I touched a gun at 14 years old. I never shot it, but, we had access to it in the neighborhood, right? And so I think I left such an impression at that meeting on the local council member and then his chief of staff that they offered me a position in the office in November 2003. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't even going to take the position because I was like, these politicians are clowns. But I'm very glad that I did take the position. I ended up spending 10 years. I started the equivalent of a man with a broom and a dustpan when I got to the city council. Started from intern to community liaison to scheduler to deputy chief of staff to district manager to chief of staff to budget director. So I worked every facet of the job, legislative director, and that's what enabled me to really move the community forward and to be elected in 2013 to the city council, and actually sworn in on March 13th, which was the anniversary of my friend's death. So I always say God makes no mistakes, because I was sworn in. I'm still very close to his family, but sworn in on the anniversary of his death, the 10th.
Wow.
Death. So I always say there's politics and then there's purpose. And then in the council, and you'll tell me when to shut up, because I could keep going on and on.
No, it's incredible.
Yeah. So then in the city council, when I came in, my district in 2012, which was the Rockaways, Laurelton, Rosedale, Springfield Gardens. But the Rockaways, most of you remember, were devastated by Hurricane Sandy. So I literally walked into office having to rebuild a community and fight to make sure that those who were homeless could at least stay in the hotels a little bit longer until they could get more stable. So there were a lot of fights, but we made it through that tough time. And then subsequently, as a freshman coming, of course, you don't get a chairmanship. But the following in January, I ended up becoming the chairman of the Environmental Protection Committee, which enabled me to really be at the forefront of climate change, but also securing the largest tranche of money Southeast Queens and the Rockaways has ever seen when you talk about infrastructure, $2 billion.
Wow.
Just for Southeast Queens and the Rockaways to build out sewer infrastructure. Then 2015, fast forward, Mark Weprin leaves to go work for the state. And I end up taking his chairmanship, and I became the chairman of the Zoning and Franchises Committee, which put me in the driver's seat when it came to shaping housing policy in the city. And then in the latter end of my term, 2017, before I became the borough president, I became the chairman of the Public Safety Committee. So I'm probably the only council member who chaired 3 committees in his 7 years in the 7 years in the city council. And then I went on to win the special election to become the borough president and sworn in December, I think 4th or something like that. So we're in our first 100 days as borough president. But I will tell you that all of those experiences coming from Southeast Queens, the experiences of my parents, the experiences of growing up as a Black man in Southeast Queens and in Far Rockaway have all shaped me to really be able to lead the borough. I think during a time when we see so much change going on, so much fear, and it's a lot of fear right now around the borough. But even through this fear, just as I saw fear after Sandy, I am more optimistic than ever that we're going to bounce back. Look at the resurgence of the Rockaways, for instance, right? And I am more optimistic that, my expertise in bringing back the community after Sandy is going to play a key role in ensuring that Queens bounces back.
So can you help me understand that? About Nancy also told me that Rockaway is not what I remember it being. Right?
Oh.
I remember Rockaway being a place that I could not go to. It was a train ride that was a long train ride, but then once you got there, there was nothing there. And then what was there was kind of unwelcoming, right? It was, dirty beaches and just scarcity of stores and kind of retail. So you were just you felt abandoned there.
Mm-hmm. Systemic racism had a lot to do with it. The lack of economic opportunities, the lack of investments in that community really kept that community down for a long time. But what you'll see now, when you go back and just to circle back to what you said, you couldn't even be out there after dark. You'd be lucky to make it out. I
grew up as a kid in the city. You couldn't be anywhere out in the dark.
No, but Far Rockaway was special in Queens. I used to, before I drove, there was a cab driver who used to, every once in a while, develop a relationship with a cab driver. But I had this one cab driver who used to tell me, when I went out to Far Rockaway, I would carry a shotgun with me. He was serious, because you could get pulled out of your car on Beat 54th Street. But that is really, we've seen significant changes, and we're not out the woods, by the way. But look at the resurgence in the post-Sandy era. We had 10 million visitors to Rockaway Beach the year before this pandemic hit, right? We're seeing the food scene pop up in the Rockaways, the cultural scene pop up in the Rockaways. And then, there's always inequities because you got the East and the West. So the West is considered, quote unquote, the more affluent. But then you look towards the East now where, in my capacity as the council member in zoning and franchise chairman, we're shepherding in close to 10,000 new units of housing, over 300,000 square feet of retail, a $40 million library is being erected as we speak. We got a significant big boost in infrastructure money for downtown Far Rockaway. I'm working on a new healthcare center there, which I think we're gonna strike a deal with the mayor on shortly. So you're talking about not only rebuilding a community in the post-pandemic world and a post-Sandy world, but really making sure we get at the crux of those inequities that were prevalent in the community for over 40 years. I'm 38, but these things were happening before I was born. So it's been really an honor to come back and to rebuild a community that I lived in, and to see the changes that are happening and the people we're putting to work and how the economy is getting boosted. During this pandemic, we still had people working out there. We still had people working. So a lot of our businesses were still able to remain afloat despite the pandemic hitting them hard. Our vacancy rates are not what you're seeing around the city. So it's a clear example of what we need to do to make sure we get the city back, bring the city back, but also bring Queens back as well.
So let me ask you a question. I'm so interested in this. The jobs that are now being created in industry, like construction and high-skilled assembly and just, craftsmanship, are those, how do you ensure that those are local jobs?
Requirement. So whenever we rezone, we did the downtown rezoning is a good example of that. I always push the developers in the city to work with local community-based organizations. And those community-based organizations serve as a foundation in the community, but they also provide a level of transparency that, although I work with developers, seeing is believing, right? If I have a relationship with community-based organizations or Workforce One, for instance, Nancy's been great. We're able to actually facilitate those job opportunities through the CBOs who are trusted with the community. So one of the last things we also require is a report. So every developer on a quarterly basis has to report to me where the job, who's hired on the site, where those jobs going, who's getting, how much they're getting paid.
Let me ask you, because I'm so interested in this. So those jobs, I remember when we had met, you were talking, and Nancy's told me about, do you call them CBOs? Is that what they're called?
Community-based organizations, yep.
So are they responsible for taking these, particularly our youth, right? Are they responsible for taking our youth and then giving them the skill sets required in order to be able to do welding and to do all the things that are, that are needed?
Yes, and a lot. So one of the things we did, which is unique when I got into office, because there's always a battle between community-based organizations. And what I did is I sat them all down at the same table and said, listen, the pie is big enough. You all shouldn't be fighting each other. So what we do is we will, for each development that happens, we'll dedicate one CBO for that specific project. So for instance, in downtown Far Rock, we have Urban Upbound. And they're doing a great job at working with the developer. And we've gotten there are over 100 people from the Rockaways working on this specific site as we speak. So when you talk about addressing crime, addressing poverty, you better make sure these jobs are going to local people. And then I also add that during Sandy, we saw a significant boost in federal dollars, and we were able to also provide opportunities for union jobs as well. So there were individuals who actually were able to tap into union apprenticeships and actually get on working in the boardwalk or working in public housing. And then we also facilitated it for the Far Rockaway Workforce One Center there. We had negotiated a deal with the developer to bring Workforce One, a new center, into the Rockaways. So the I like to call it the stew. Like when you mix it all together, you're creating a new economy, but an economy that works for everyone. And I'm really excited about the future of what that holds. But there are going to be a lot of similar projects around Queens, and we're working hard to make sure that the model we fostered and created in the Rockaways could be duplicated around the borough.
And then so the new jobs that are going to be created with all that development, the new jobs that are going to be created that are kind of peripheral to it. So let's say restaurants and everything else. How can you also ensure, I'm just so interested in this, right? How can you ensure that, or is it ensure? I'm not sure, right? But how can you make sure, right? How can you make sure that those retail establishments, the rights to the retail establishment, because the landlords are going to want as much rent as they can get, which means the small mom and pops are going to have to compete with Rite Aid and some of the behemoths that can pay larger rent.
We did something unique, and density is a curse word in certain parts of Queens, and it's no different in the Rockaways. But there we allowed significant density. I talked about 10,000 units coming online, and that's actually helping us to subsidize some of the rent. So I've actually worked with one of the developers, for instance, to make sure that there are opportunities for existing restaurants who may want to move on, or existing stores who may want to move on to the site. We're also going to have something we call nonprofit row, a dedicated row of storefronts that can go to community-based organizations who need new space in the community as well. We also just approved another project called Auburn East, and this happened as the borough president, and that's about almost a little bit close to 100 acres of land that's going to be redeveloped, beachfront property, about 1,800 units of housing, affordable home ownership, a boutique hotel, also a brewery. We're bringing the Long Island City Brewery, which is Rockaway Brewery, which actually brews in Long Island City, is relocating their operation to that site. So we've even spoken to them about making sure local residents could be trained in these opportunities so that, they can have access to a good job as well. So
I'm so interested in this. Do you mind if I interrupt? I interrupt a lot, right?
No, go ahead. Anytime, because I keep going.
I'm so fascinated. I think everybody's fascinated, but I do interrupt. And if you had come on right on time, because I scheduled this for 7:10, and I would have told you, listen, I'm going to interrupt a lot, but we didn't. So I'm surprising you with it. I interrupt a lot. So how do you find now that you're seeing all that economic development beginning, that your retail establishments and the local residents are already competing with the big box stores? And have you seen yet where any of the developers are now trying to acquire labor outside of what you had agreed on? And how do you kind of enforce that? I know you can't enforce it legalistically as much as you can enforce it in goodwill.
So I always tell developers that you're going to have to come see me again. So get it right. And these are a large part of them are nonprofit affordable housing developers. So they're gonna want to. Queens is gonna be a place where Queens is the future. I mean, I'm telling you now, you're gonna have some exciting projects coming online. And I remember when I was chairman of the zoning committee, there was one specific developer who, they did affordable home ownership. And they did not get it right. There was some defects in some of the roofs and other things. And I said to them, listen, if you don't fix this issue, I can guarantee you're going to come back and sit at a desk and ask for approval on another project one day. You're going to see me again. And they did have to come see me again. It's the funniest story. And we were actually able to get them to spend, I think, close to $2 million.
Okay. I got another question.
So I'm going to throw that in quick because that's important, but it's also relationships. And I think we've done a good job at navigating and keeping relationships and dialogues open. That is key in leadership. Even if we don't agree on every facet of a plan, the relationship is critical. And so I think that's largely has helped us to be successful in ensuring that local residents could be successful on the sites. But once again, I go back to that report that I talked about. They have to provide me an annual report. No developer wants the Queensborough president standing up saying you're not honoring your promise.
What happens if you have a big real estate development and they want to hoard their retail, waiting in anticipation of Rite Aid bidding the property up? So they're gonna kind of warehouse that retail property and price the mom and pops out of the market. Is that something that you're encountering yet?
So it's different around different parts of Queens. I'll go borough wide. I mean, every community has different needs. So if you're talking about the Rockaways, actually the Rockaways probably, Far Rockaway would appreciate having a Rite Aid because they don't have access to the sort of retail other parts of Queens have. But then you go further west. And I remember there was a big fight in Jackson Heights, for instance. Target, just a smaller store was coming in. The smaller Target was coming in. They have a smaller model now, not the big box store. And there was a lot of community pushback on it because the community rightfully felt that they would compete with some of the smaller mom and pops. So the fact is that we have to look at zoning, and I always say that, as someone who studied the zoning resolution, a lot of parts of Queens never adapted to the growth that was happening in their specific communities. If done the right way with community input, just as the Rockaways, I think there's room for a little bit of everybody to be successful. But the borough's growing. It's growing, and we have to make sure that the zoning keeps up with that growth.
There's a lot of interesting questions here. And I spoke to your colleague today, and I told him it's been my experience that I don't even write down questions in advance of these things anymore. Because people's questions are always better than mine. And these are some really awesome ones, and they're going to make you think. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So I want to thank Chuck so much for being here. Chuck and I have done a Periscope. Chuck is awesome, and we speak on DM a lot, and he's a great blogger. So Chuck says, how do you reground the future in Queens when the internet is driving things? So now you've got to develop the retail environment there and the employment environment there and you've also got to compete with the internet that always is going to, be a little bit cheaper, and it's kind of a monopoly that you have to compete with.
Oh, everybody's shopping on Amazon. I get what he's saying. But what's amazing is you'll be surprised in Queens how much support our small businesses get. And we just actually worked with the New York Mets. We just worked with Steve Cohen and created a program called the Queens Small Business Grant Program, which is about a $17.5 million allocation from the New York Mets. To make sure we keep a lot of our small mom and pop stores going through these challenging times, because we know a lot of people are behind on their rent. Over 600 businesses got a piece of that grant, up to $20,000. I think so. So let's just start there, because we got to make sure we keep them alive right now, and that they can keep pay their rent and bounce back. The other thing I'll say is that I think that the work environment is largely never going to go back to what it was before. A lot of people are going to live, work, and play in their communities, and we're starting to see that as well. So don't think Manhattan. I mean, no offense to Manhattan, I don't see Manhattan bouncing back the same way. I think it will bounce back, but I think you'll largely start to see it just as JetBlue. Speaking to JetBlue, because JetBlue wanted to pull out of Queens. I spoke to the CEO a few weeks ago, because he was saying, listen, a lot of our workers, we're trying to figure out our strategy, because a lot of our workers may not go back to work. So it's how do we create these business incubators is something that I largely want to see around the borough. Interestingly enough, too, during the pandemic, what I noticed around the borough, restaurants got really creative. And, you may hear my son in the background, dancing around and singing in a minute if you haven't already. But, some of us got to get out of the house to go to try to have meetings in a quiet space. So what I noticed was some of the restaurants actually rented space, very cheap, get a coffee and a to come and work out of their spaces. So I found the creativity.
Yeah, I've never seen that. Nancy, have you seen that?
It was big. It was big.
You know about that?
Restaurants renting out their space as like business incubators. I was like, this is genius. Come here for $20 for the whole day, get an empanada, get your coffee, and work. Use my internet, and we're going to charge you $20. So I think the work environment is really going to change. I know the mayor's ordering back 80,000 or so workers May 1st. But I think the private market and, private companies, they're going to look at things different. I think you may end up with a hybrid model.
That's really fascinating. These type of changes, I'm so fascinated by the changes that are going on right now, and it does make people industrious.
Yep.
Right? It's really interesting.
Yep.
There's some questions here that are good questions. Maybe they could have been phrased a little bit more gently, but it's a very interesting question. So here, Ventana's window. Oh, I recognize Ventana's window, and their question is phrased nicely. So I take that back. So, and I like the dog. You see that?
Yep, manufacturing. I love it.
Okay, so let me just repeat the question so that everybody has a chance to hear it. So Ventana's window. Ventana's got a nice picture of a German Shepherd, by the way. Ventana's window says CBOs and politicians tout construction, but those jobs end. What are you doing to bring back manufacturing?
I'm happy to have brought back one of the largest manufacturing deals to Queens, actually. And this is something that I worked on right before I became borough president, and actually the construction has started. Many of you may remember Bartlett Dairy, actually Elmhurst Dairy from Queens, but then Bartlett Dairy, now they renamed themselves. They had left Queens and went on to New Jersey. And we worked with the Economic Development Corporation on a really nice incentive package. And we brought back 400 manufacturing jobs back to Queens. We took it from Jersey. Sorry, New Jersey. Sorry if you're on from New Jersey. So right on the outskirts of JFK Airport, Bartlett Dairy is now under construction. I'm very proud of this. 400 union jobs, average pay scale about $70,000 a year. So to get to your question, obviously a lot of our industrial areas have been hit hard. We have to make them more attractive. I mean, think about, the outskirts of JFK where it's ripe for opportunity, but we're competing with other states, right? You think about Atlanta, think about Texas and other areas where it's becoming more lucrative to do manufacturing. as well. And we have to do more here. I'm not going to sit here and lie. And this is why zoning is so important as well, because what we saw a lot, and I actually worked on some of this manufacturing stuff when I was in the council as the zoning chairman. But, a lot of hotels, a lot of industries were coming into manufacturing areas. I believe, I may be blanking on this, but we now require a special permit in terms of manufacturing. Now, if you look to build something else in a manufacturing district, you now are required to get a special permit. So that's one way we need to continue to work to make sure we preserve manufacturing. And also through that special permit, I'll give a good example of this. Home Depot just built a new store in Maspeth, and it was great. But one of the challenges was I think there was some manufacturing on the site before. And, obviously Home Depot came in, created some jobs, and bye. One of the things we were able to negotiate through the special permit was some manufacturing space next to the Home Depot. So we and relatively at good pricing, affordable pricing for that company that's going to come in. So I think we have to continue. I'm not going to say the cat is not out the bag, because the city did not do enough to protect zoning manufacturing zones in the first place. But I think moving into the future, there are a lot more protections in place that'll help us to grow manufacturing in the city. Oh, let me before you hop into this, Long Island City is becoming a hub for manufacturing. So I've been talking
Nancy, you know that?
Life science companies, life sciences, they're creating a hub. It's like an ecosystem in LIC. So we're talking about manufacturing masks and all of these things. There's a little hub growing in Long Island City, and we're going to be working with both the city and state to try to figure out how do we create some incentives for these life science companies to also grow in Queens. So there's
hold on. Nancy, you've heard of this?
Yes, we work with the industrial transportation.
Nancy says
we have the
Nancy
for Long Island City manufacturing.
Nancy says yes. She knew all about it.
Queens is the future. Queens is the future.
It really is, and I'm so excited about this discussion. So now, and there's a lot of questions here, so I do want to get to them. But do you find yourself competing with, Mayor Suarez and mayors around the country who are just trying to use this as an opportunity to be industrious themselves and bring in those companies that used to be kind of place-based, right, in California and San Francisco, and that are now kind of going into the most favorable climate for their business? And have you seen businesses leaving Queens? Where are they going? And how do you bring back businesses? How do you compete with friendlier taxing regimes that are more flexible into giving kind of tax credits and other things?
Well, I'm not going to say that there are certainly not political and economic challenges, quality of life challenges. I was speaking about JetBlue a little while ago, and one of the things the CEO stressed was quality of life issues. So that's something as Borough President, my first 100 days, we got to hear. But we assured him we would work on those specific issues. So, safety and security, first and foremost, has to be in place. And it doesn't mean we agree with everything the NYPD does, because we never will, especially as a Black man. I have my experiences coming up, but we still have to work collectively together to make sure we have a safe environment conducive to business and conducive to making sure that New York City residents feel safe. So let's just start with that premise first. I am cutting ribbons on new businesses every day in Queens. I'm seeing through this pandemic, I think it probably was my first month, cut ribbons on at least 4 or 5 new businesses, just in Jamaica alone. But then every day on my calendar, I see a new ribbon cutting for another business in Queens. So I think we're going to see a big comeback here. And I know that there's been this notion and this story that's being written that everybody's leaving New York, but I'm not in Queens. I am not experiencing that. I'm seeing people who want to come in here. I'm seeing life sciences companies who want to be here. We're opening up a new hotel at Resorts World Casino. They're now hiring. I'm seeing Rockaway Beach still being developed.
So I got a question.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about the future. I can't speak for every other borough, but I'm optimistic about Queens.
You know why? Because you're like me. When I have my investor series. You got to see my investor series. It's amazing. And I spoke to your colleague today, And he and I are both very bullish. We were talking about the stock market. We were talking about the future. I'm the same way. I'm bullish. I think, and I think Queens is really representative of that. And we can discuss that in just a moment. But there's some interesting questions here, and some of them are rough because this is a legitimate one. So
I'm a big one.
So interior foliage, and I've got to follow up with interior foliage. We've DM'd a lot. So it says Queens is okay because of families that can work in family businesses, and it's not as transient as Brooklyn or Manhattan.
That is not true. That is not true. I think Queens is very transient too. But I will agree with you that there are a lot of family-owned businesses, a lot of family-run businesses, and we got to see that, even during the pandemic. There were some businesses who were able to, they unfortunately had to lay off some workers at one point. But, they had their sons and their daughters in the shop with their nieces and nephews. So they were able to cut some of those costs because the family members wanted to see those businesses survive during this pandemic. And I got to speak to a lot of those business owners when we were, celebrating some of the businesses that got the Queens Small Business Grant. So I think that, I think it's a mixed bag. I think Queens is growing. I think we're seeing people move in from all over the country, all over the city, other boroughs. In particular.
There are a lot of questions here. I want to ask them because I still have questions. There's a lot going on in here. Okay, so Peebo 721, thank you so much for being here. You got to get a picture, Peebo. You got to get a picture. Says, help me understand this question. Was the area able to take advantage of federal opportunity zone money?
Oh, for Far Rockaway? Did they mean for Far Rockaway? I think we got Chuck Schumer, yes. And in the whole crazy part is that it was not in the federal opportunity zone, and the community was right to be in that opportunity zone. But we were able to work with the Economic Development Corporation and really work with Chuck Schumer, and we were able to leverage that. I could not understand. Like Long Island City, and it's growing, a lot of market rate housing. But how these opportunity zones go. They're supposed to go to, undeveloped, underprivileged communities, economically deprived communities, and Rockaway wasn't included. So yes, Chuck Schumer helped us with that.
Okay, and I'm so appreciative that Malcolm Flex is here because Malcolm Flex, I follow him on Twitter. And one of the interesting things that I've seen in my years on Twitter now is I've seen people's lives advance in what I think of as Twitter time. I've seen people really use Twitter as more than just kind of a networking tool or kind of a notebook, but I've seen people kind of emotionally grow and professionally grow. And it's just such a fascinating thing. But don't follow me on Twitter too much. You won't like it.
I don't have enough time to be on Twitter anymore.
I know, yeah. So you're awesome. So Malcolm Flex, there's two parts to this question. Says first, what is the outlook for New York real estate given the advent of a lot of these urban jobs remoting? And then I want to follow up with that question, with his question, where he says, well, Malcolm Flex continues, is there any sort of way to really draw value into those areas given the tax rates and inconveniences?
Incentives. So, there are tax abatements that are available, for instance, for a lot. And we work with the city. And you asked me earlier, how do we leverage, making sure that the jobs go to the local community? How do we leverage making sure that if there were certain commitments made to investments, how do we ensure those things happen? We largely, a lot of times, these developers want, in these, especially communities like the Rockaways, are looking for a tax incentive. So we're able to leverage that because they have to get a tax incentive. Tax abatement would have to actually be passed by the city council in order for the developer to get it.
So are you seeing? Are you encountering any adversarial battles right now or competitive battles with other councils in other districts to get some of the money that might be available? I mean, is there kind of a council by council, district by district battle going on?
Well, let me just speak in Queens as a whole. Queens has largely not received as much its fair share in the housing budget, but there were certain areas. So like when I represented just the Rockaways in the council, we were able to leverage that because we worked very closely with the de Blasio administration. So we probably in Queens, I probably got like a lion's share at that time when I was in the city council of the affordable housing budget. But what I will say moving forward is that there are some exciting projects that will possibly happen under the next administration. You have Willets Point, you have Sunnyside Yards. I mean, these are some projects that I think Sunnyside Yards could probably be one of the largest developments the country sees actually built out.
Really?
Probably, yeah, in probably decades. If and when it happens, I'm more confident that these things are feasible because of the federal stimulus dollars that we're going to see infused into local states, and cities. So I think that Queens, you will see a lot more growth. Look at, I mean, Brooklyn is like almost.
Okay, but I'm going to follow up with that. So Rising Serpent, I want to thank Rising Serpent so much for being here. And this is a perfect follow-up. You see, I don't have to write these questions. Right? That's cool. So Rising Serpent says, any plans for tax breaks for businesses? Taxes are too high in New York. So how much is part of your job now lobbying for the interest of the businesses in Queens? Well,
I view my role is to advocate and to defend the borough. So we've spent a lot of times. I've done probably close to 5 or 10 small business town halls, and those happen probably monthly. We have everybody from the SBA on to the Small Business Services Commission to State Liquor Authority. So we know that there's been a lot of challenges on our businesses. Now, as Borough President, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you like I don't have a say on if tax breaks go for businesses. But that's something that, I hear often from our small businesses. The question is, how do we pay for these things? And, you saw a big bill passed in the state, which I believe, I forgot which state senator passed this legislation, but you're going to see a big infusion of money into small businesses around the state. And we're hoping to leverage that money to offset some of that tax burden that you may feel. I think there's another bill in the council, I forgot the name of it, the commercial rent stabilization bill or something like that. I'm not sure if that will go somewhere. I mean, somebody has to pay for it, I will always say. But I think my primary objective right now is to make sure that we're getting our fair share of grant money into small businesses in Queens. And let me just end, Adam, on this question. Before I left the council, we saw an infusion of money come into small businesses around the city. And it was a grants program that the Department of Small Business Services offered. 56% of that grant money went into Manhattan. Now, out of boroughs split that. Queens got probably 13, 14% of the share of that grant program. I was happy to pass legislation that now mandates the Department of Small Business Services to report where they're putting their grant money and loans in. And that offered a level of transparency and accountability. I think we're hovering somewhere around that grants program, hitting about.
We're going to keep going. Listen, I got to get a bell. I'm going to get a bell.
Yeah, but I got a record, so I got to speak about the record and incorporate where you want us to go. But
you're awesome. I just got to get a bell. You're awesome. Okay. Do you know what my longest Periscope, my longest one of these, how long do you think it was? Yes.
Wait, say it again?
The longest live broadcast I've done with somebody like this. How long do you think it was?
Probably 4 hours.
4.5 hours.
That was close.
4.5 hours, yeah. So help me understand this. So Janan, and again, thank you so much for being here, Janan, and for joining me on an experiment where I joined Podcast Notes on Twitter's Spaces, right? That was pretty interesting. So Janan Glasgow says, talk about shared resources like a new lab in the Navy Yard. Is that a Navy Yard in Brooklyn or is there a Navy Yard in Queens?
Brooklyn, probably. That's it. That's the Brooklyn Navy Yard she's probably alluding to. She may want to put a little bit more information on. Are you talking about shared space? I mean, I've been.
Well, earlier they said, Janan said, how about
new lab incubator? Okay. Oh yeah, I mean, this is my hope. I mean, there are some exciting projects coming down the pipeline in Queens, and what I'm hoping is that we could figure out some incubator space in a lot of these projects. And I was talking about the life sciences a little while ago, and they actually are planning for these sort of things. So I'm excited about projects, coming online in Queens. You have Hallett's Point in Queens, which is in Astoria. I don't know if the project will pass because there's still a long journey to shaping the project into something that I think will be beneficial to the local community, but also providing some community and space, incubator space as well for local entrepreneurs as well. Is something that we're looking at as well. So I think all of these projects provide a key opportunity to do that. In the Rockaways, I can speak because I shaped those projects and they were approved already. These projects are starting to move now that, COVID is letting up a little bit. But every project we have about no minimum, and I have 3 projects that I approved there, about 75,000 square feet in community facility space that can be used for something like a new lab incubator as well. So we're looking at community facility in every project that we do so that we could foster these opportunities for residents around the borough.
So does a one-time, and I'm just looking at some of the questions and some of the notes, I get to see people interacting with each other. Can you see that? Do you see the questions in the comments? Don't look at them too much. Don't look at them. I'll look at them. So some of the questions have been about if these one-time kind of boosts, these one-time payments that don't really replenish a business, it just kind of is a quick repair, a quick fix, but it doesn't really replenish the financial health of the underlying business.
I think you have 3 programs now. I mean, and there's no one size fits all approach. But what I will say is between the Queens Small Business Grant, now with the city getting some federal assistance, they're going to come out with a grant program. You're going to have a program on a state level. You still have PPP, going. And I think that, one of the complaints we heard about the PPP program early on is that, it was very hard to access it for small businesses with a lot of bureaucratic red tape. So I think the federal government has done a better job this round at loosening some restrictions to make it easier for businesses to tap into those programs. So if you're in Queens, you have at least 4 different routes to go to tap into some money. And then we're also, like I said, trying to leverage private, and I talked about the New York Mets, private-public partnerships here as well, which I think could be beneficial in sort of helping keep a lot of our small businesses alive as well. So.
And then going back to JetBlue for just one moment, where they talked about quality of life issues, and you said that there was, you've got that there's kind of a balancing act because people do need to feel secure, but we're also taking a look at a time where there's a lot of change. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So Rising Serpent, and again, thank you for joining us. Just talk about law and order in New York. And I understand that not the militancy of law and order, because that, we all understand it,
I get where they're going.
Yeah.
So, I was the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, and I always tell people I don't shy away from my own experience as a Black man. I at 13 years old, I had my first police encounter just walking to a friend's home where a cousin and I was accosted walking to my friend's house because the police said we fit the description of 2 people who robbed a store. I'm like, what? They subsequently went on to stop and frisk me. And I didn't even know. They said, do you have anything in your pockets, before they went for the frisk? And I go into my pockets and all 4 detectives in their unmarked car draw their guns on us. I'm glad to have lived through that encounter. So I always start with that premise. It's not my only experience as a Black man in Queens or in America. But we also work with our law enforcement partners as well. I just had Commissioner Shea on last week, Police Commissioner Dermot Shea on at my Queens Borough Board meetings, which are monthly meetings with all the community boards, and the public gets to chime in as well on things going on around the borough. And it's going to take a collaborative effort. It's not easy. It's a little messy, but the bottom line is where we can get more transparency and accountability within the department. That's good in the long term. If you have and let me give a good model of this. I talked about the Rockaways. I was there 3 weeks ago on one of the most violent. These are the stories that are not told. The papers do not cover. They don't really cover the good stories. But I had a development in the Rockaways. I had, I think, 2 rappers killed there in the past. this development, you couldn't go a day without a shooting. We celebrated over 200 days of no shootings in that development. Now, why is that possible? Job opportunities, resources into community-based organizations like a program, a CBO called Rock Safe Streets. They're largely people from Far Rockaway who actually are hired to work with gang members. And they get a certain amount of job slots. So if you're trying to get some of these young people off the streets, if they're selling their little weed or whatever they were selling, you're like, here's an opportunity for you. And they're able to actually give them a job slot to do something helpful and useful in the community. And then on top of it, and then the last thing is, then you add in community buy-in, and you add in community policing, which the neighborhood coordination police officers have actually done a very good job in this development. You put all four of those things together and you're going to have a safer neighborhood. So we need to see more of that happening around the city. But I would say like that development in parts of the Rockaways, and I'm not saying it's perfect because of the pandemic, we definitely had some setbacks during the pandemic. But in the neighborhood I lived in, there used to be gunshots outside my window every night in the Rockaways. We went right before the pandemic, 365 days without a shooting or murder in that community. Why? The culmination of those things. So we have to figure out a way to make sure we're addressing the systemic issues, the job issues, and then making sure that that investment in programming is happening. And then you wrap around policing and true community policing. I will always say the 101st Precinct is a great example of what we need to do and what police precincts should do in order to build relationships with the community. That's how you get safety.
It's interesting because I remember stop and frisk really well. And I was very pro stop and frisk. And then I remember, and I was telling you this right before with Clarence Norman and just a whole bunch of people. And they were like, well, you're only seeing a part of it. You're not seeing what happens, how much devastation is going on when
I'll give you a good story. I'm going to give you a good story. One day, I don't think I was a staffer. I might have been a city council member at that time. And I just happened to stay in my office. I was there a little later, and I get a call on the phone from a father who was driving home with his baby in the backseat, coming home from work in a suit with his wife, who was pulled over, stopped and frisked. And for no reason. This is a guy who works for like one of them Fortune 500 companies. He couldn't believe it happened to him. This was what was happening in the street. So what does that do? It builds an animosity. It builds a mistrust between the department. This is a working guy,
It's amazing.
And whether you're working or not, it doesn't matter. But the point is, of course, we need criminals off the street. Nobody in the community is saying we don't want the guy we know who's shooting up everybody not locked up. Everybody wants that guy or girl gone, right? But we also want, I will always say there's no contradiction in asking for safe streets and fair policing. If you got to do both.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was very pro stop and frisk. And then long before de Blasio, I remember speaking with Clarence Norman, speaking with a few other people. They were actually leftier than I was, right? They're pretty left, you know that. And they're pretty radical, but I respect that. I'm cool with radical. So they actually explained to me that I'm only seeing a little bit of it. I'm not seeing kind of the emotional effect it has. And I'm also not seeing what happens when the cops swarm into the projects and put everybody up against a wall. It just destroys a community.
I'm going to give you one more story on this. Another story. I just got elected to the city council. I'll never forget this one too. A mother calls. So her son is a straight A student, never been in trouble, coming from football practice, lives in one of the public housing developments, takes a cab home, gets in the cab, gets to his development, gets out the cab, and he's pulled out of the cab and stopped and frisked. Has never been in trouble. He cried. He was so shaken up. He could not stop crying. And I had to say to the mom, and I obviously went and met that young man, spoke to him, and unfortunately I had to tell him it won't be his last experience. Unfortunately, I had to tell him the truth.
Yeah, interesting.
My last experience, had to speak to the police precinct. But think about what that interaction did to that young man.
No, I'm going to tell you a story. Listen to the story.
13 years old.
I never get followed in stores. I don't get followed. Look at me.
I get followed. Even as borough president.
Yeah. But I never get followed in stores. But then I think the times that I have been, which is like twice, I was walking around like a drugstore once and the person was following me because I came from the gym. I probably look bad. Nevertheless, you know how furious I was? And Nancy knows. Nancy was on vacation. She had to go to France by herself or Spain or whatever. I go shopping. The security guard is following me around and I'm getting all testosterone. I was very confrontational with the person and extremely. I was like, why are you following me around? I mean, I got very, very emotional, very confrontational with them, so much so. And he was a young immigrant. I mean, come on, this job, I compromised his job. I really did. That's how confrontational I got with him, that I actually compromised his job. I mean, it was just very bad because then his bosses are going to evaluate him on the interaction with me. I mean, I went to the store 2 days later when Nancy came back. We both went there. I was like, listen, I'm really sorry. But the experience of that, I won't forget. I got really furious. I'll give you one more story. You want to hear this?
Uh-huh.
I was accidentally actually apprehended by the police when I was a kid. Okay. I was about 20 years old or something. I went to Central, whatever it's called, right? Central Booking. And I was there until the judge could come. My mom was a probation officer, so I understood the thing. But in Brooklyn, actually. But here I was. My mom had moved on. She was no longer. She had moved to another state, and so I went to Central Booking. I was there until the judge came in. So I was there for like 36 hours. You know, listen to this. I learned so much. You know what I learned? I was getting out. I spoke to those kids, and this was like 15. This was like 15, 20 years ago. This is a while ago. But I spoke to those kids, and obviously there's some bad people in there, right? There's some bad people, no doubt, and they need to get put away. But there was a lot of young kids that were just literally in the wrong place at the wrong time, literally. And I felt, and they're going to get locked up because they can't. My lawyer came in. I got out of there, right?
Right.
But it was a very interesting experience that these young kids, because they used to do, they would stop everybody on the block. Do you remember those days? They would stop everybody on the block. And if you were on that block where there was a crack house or something, everybody was going to get frisked. Everybody was going to get thrown into the bus and go away. Those were the kids that I met.
About weed, I mean, you had all these kids getting locked up over low-level marijuana. Think about how that impacted their lives, the rest of their lives. You think about, you got that offense on your record. You can't get what most people don't recognize, you can't get a college loan if you had that on your record. Think about how many kids' lives were destroyed over low-level marijuana. I live in a community, the 105th, where this is Black middle-class neighborhood. This is the one community in the country where Blacks earn on average more than whites and where Blacks have more education than whites. But it led the city, and you don't see people walking around the streets just smoking weed all day, but it led the city in marijuana summonses and arrests for over a decade. So think about the impact it had on many of these kids who come from a middle-class neighborhood, who unfortunately went through that justice system and were never able to bounce back over a low-level marijuana, because then it becomes a revolving cycle.
It does.
Because once you can't get a job, and then mom is like, listen, you've been here, you like 25, you got to go. You know, how you got to try to figure it out. So you can't get that job, you turn into a life of crime. And so when people have their law and order conversation, this all stems from something that largely, even the police commissioner admitted to this, by the way, because I did a lot of work around marijuana justice in the city council as public safety chair. I actually passed a law that mandates every precinct now in the city of New York to report on where marijuana summonses and arrests, with their marijuana summonses and arrests are. That subsequently actually did lead to sort of uncovering that 86% of all arrests for marijuana were Black and brown New Yorkers, which then subsequently pushed the rock up the hill for legalization. So that I'm proud of my work on marijuana justice, but that's where a lot of this stuff stemmed from. That low-level offense or that stop in the street, having small and then you're done.
Let me ask you a question. And I'm curious. I don't know. And there's a lot of questions here, so I want to get to other people's questions also. But I grew up, because my mom was a probation officer, she was really liberal. I'd even be like, Mom, you're really liberal. But I did learn a lot about good kids going to jail for stupid things. And once they're there, it's not good. Right? They're gonna get sexually assaulted. They're gonna get into gangs. It's just not a good thing to be. But now with Rikers Island, and I'm asking, I don't know the answer to this, right? But with Rikers Island, kind of, I don't know what the word is, but being kind of taken apart or whatever it is. So are those people better off? Because you still need to protect people from the bad people. I mean, there's still such a thing as really bad people.
Well, the thing, Rikers Island is not. So if you're a murderer, remember you're on Rikers Island, and this is the misconception that you're supposed to be on Rikers Island for 25 years. If you get, say, convicted of murder, the challenge with Rikers Island is that a lot of people sit on Rikers Island and they don't get a fast trial, right? So that's why the state legislation to push for a speedy trial was so important, because you're only supposed to be in Rikers Island until your trial is commenced. So if you get charged with a murder, you go to state prison or federal prison, whatever it is. You're not supposed to sit on Rikers Island. But the whole system has been broken for so long that you got this mix of kids who may be in there, like a Khalif Router, who was in there for allegedly stealing a book bag, right? The only reason he languished on Rikers Island is because his mom couldn't afford $200 bail.
Oh my God!
Yeah, that was it. And he died. He committed suicide. Now and he was innocent. He did not.
Why did he commit suicide? I mean, was he? Look, he
gets accused of stealing a book bag, which he did not steal. His mom could not make the bill, and he wasn't in a gang or anything when he went into Rikers Island. So when you go into Rikers Island, they have things. They used to have a program. I think the newspapers deemed it the gladiator school, right? You better join a gang, or they're gonna punish you. So I think he sort of went in there isolated and wasn't part of any gang, and they beat the heck out of him. He was also assaulted by the corrections officers, and he came out, was trying to get his life together, but his mental health took such a toll. That place killed him. JP had stepped in. A lot of people. He went on to I think he went on to college. He started college, trying to graduate. I think he might have graduated, or at least I think he might have got his associates. But he could not handle that. Let me say this to you too. I've toured Rikers, so I did a tour about 4 years ago, and I got to tell you, you got some of the greatest minds sitting on. There was a young man. I was so impressed by him. He's in there doing like chemistry, and I'm like, why are you here? He's like, I'm gonna get my life together. But the problem is, once you get into a place like that, what I heard, the number one thing I heard from everybody, and they tried to take me to the nicest places, and I was like, I didn't come here to see the nicest places. So they finally got me up to a secure location there, and a secure facility, where the gangbangers are, where the people are. And what the number one thing I heard from them is, I thought they were going to be complaining about the food. They were like, no, we want more training. We want more job training. Once we finish our programming, that's it. So that's what I heard, and that facility could never provide that opportunity for them. The other complaint I heard was, we want an updated law library. Those were the things I heard. It's interesting, because I'm going in having this misconception that they're going to just be complaining about the food, and they were very clear that, they wanted to get their lives together, but there was just no pathway for them to gain those processes.
I want to get back to those type of questions, but now I've got another question. So before I ask those people's questions and continue with Rising Serpent's question, and Janan said something more about it also with crime, because it is an important thing, right? I'm just so fascinated by this. So about training these people. But how can you distinguish? Because I know a lot of police officers also, right? And they feel kind of very restrained. How can you keep the bad? And it's a philosophical question. I'm not asking you, because
I'm not here to sell you an alternative universe.
They
do, but there are some young people who clearly don't belong there. They're there over low. Well, they were there at one point. Now that obviously bail reform happened. Largely a lot of those individuals who might have been in there over a low-level marijuana. You said your mom was she was a probation officer. Yeah. A lot of people were put back in Rikers if they got caught with weed, right? So I passed a law actually before I left the city council that banned that. So if you went in to see a probation officer and you had a little weed in your system, that got cut out. Because why should you go back? First of all, we know everybody, no matter what your race is, everybody smokes weed at the same average. Whether you're white, black, Asian, whatever.
Just so you know, I don't.
All these black kids and brown kids are languishing on Rikers Island because they went to see their probation officer and it was dirty. Their pee was dirty. They found marijuana in their system. I mean,
so let me ask you, just because I'm so curious about this. But when you deal with JetBlue and you deal with these large employers and you have to ask them to stay and be kind of that emissary, right? You're an emissary, Queens has been so lucky. I mean, you're awesome. Queens has been really lucky. A lot of people don't understand that we don't have the problems that a lot of other areas have. I mean, maybe it's because we have so many immigrants here and we have, I don't know. I mean, you know what? So I'm just going to go on to other questions because I'm sure that it's going to come up again. RM Tampa, I'm going to challenge you. You see, you're on the spot now. Look at this question. RM Tampa, I said him, but perhaps you're not a him. So, you've got a picture of is that a horse? Can you tell? Is that a horse? Do you see that picture? Do you see the picture that they got?
I see it.
Is that a horse? I want to say it's a horse, but then it could be a pony or something. I don't know. I'm a city boy. I've seen like 2 horses in my life. I don't know. So RM Tampa says, can you name, this is a tough one. Get ready for this. Can you name some of the talent from Queens, comedians, musicians, angel investors, etc.?
I mean, we have a wealth. I mean, I could, comedians, Jesus. Did Eddie Murphy live here? I think he did. I mean, think about Jackie Robinson.
How about the current? Do you know any venture capital people right now, other than me, I guess? But do you know any venture capital people from Queens? Because we got to get that going.
I mean, I got James Brown from Queens. Angel. I mean, I'm sure I do know them and have met them. I have no idea, though.
We're going to work on that. You know that? It was a tough question. You know what, RM Tampa? That's such a good question. I appreciate it because you know what? We're going to take care of that. Comedians, musicians, angel investors.
What's funny is we just did the premiere of. So I actually did the premiere. We were one of 2 places chosen in the country to do the premiere of Coming to America 2. It was really great. Amazon Studios and forgot a few other corporations also were a part of this and organizations. But Queens is the future. Like one of 2 places chosen in the world to premiere that. It was okay.
RM Tampa's got a good. You can't get out of this one. You can't get out of this one.
All right.
Okay.
Listen, I can tell you, LL Cool J.
But how about current? Okay,
I can talk about my neighbor.
Okay, so current. So you know what? Because I think their question was more about current, present day, particularly with venture capital, angel investors. We're going to solve that. We're going to fix that. RM Tampa.
I don't deal with,
That's a good question, though, right? Now here's another question. So Chuck, and this is a good opportunity for you to give a quick overview of the ethnic diversity because it's incredible. It's incredible. So
190 countries represented in Queens, 350 languges.
So Chuck asked a really good question. He said, "What's your vision for people from lots of different backgrounds to personally connect? Because now that people are all Zoomified, we want those people that are from Bengal to also interact with the people from Pakistan and Brazil. I mean, it's a unique.
The answer already. We're already doing it. So I not created, but Helen Marshall, who was 2 borough presidents before me, she was right before Melinda Katz, created something called the Queens General Assembly. So we actually opened the application process up for. It's like the UN of like Queens County. And we have about 90 different individuals from all different backgrounds who meet monthly on different issues impacting Queens. And most importantly, they get to talk about their culture. And we celebrate, actually, one of the other things I love about the office is we celebrate a whole lot of holidays. So we're all, and even as borough president, because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and be like, hey, I knew about all these cultures before, I became borough president or when I was running. I got to meet a lot of new people, but Queens it's so diverse. It's amazing. So the Queens General Assembly has served as a space for people from all different backgrounds to work together. They're planning events together as we speak. We're also, there's been a lot of Asian hate violence recently. So we actually working with the Assembly, are actually planning a big march in Queens for May 2nd, which I'm sure you'll hear about. We just announced that with Congresswoman Grace Ming this morning. in Flushing. So that's one space. And then the other thing I'm doing, which is an initiative I worked on with Assemblymember Catalina Cruz out of Jackson Heights, is we're going to open up the first Queens, what we call the Queens Immigrant Welcome Center at Queensborough Hall. And that's going to provide a space for people from all over Queens to come and get services and to connect with different CBOs. But most importantly, having everybody in a room talking is going to really change the face of Queens. And also, you'll be surprised at how much alike we are. So you may eat a, everybody calls a dumpling. Hey, we have, a Puerto Rican Panamanian dumpling. Well, Jamaica got dumplings too. You may use a different seasoning, but we all are, so much more alike than what we think.
Yeah, I mean, I Queens is the United Nations. I
Queens
love it.
The United Nations.
It's amazing, and it's happy, right? It's a happy place.
Yep.
So it's very interesting. The library, right? For me growing up, and for you growing up, for Nancy growing up, for most people that are over than 40. How old are you? You're like 41, right?
Nope, 38.
Wow, you're young, but I know you
just turned 38, April 9th.
Oh wow, happy birthday! Oh, I remember that. I think I texted you. But you're probably one of the last generations that spent a lot of time in a library, right? You were always in a library, I'm sure. So the library, and Nancy would tell me about Jamaica Library, how impressive it is. How is that experience over? Is that ever going to come back?
No, it's libraries in Queens are booming. I mean, I think we saw right before the pandemic, the largest, I think, and I could quote the Queens Library, the largest circulation in history was happening right here in Queens County, just right before the pandemic. So I think they saw the largest circulation of books going out and coming in, and a large amount of people going in. And remember, a lot of communities in Queens didn't necessarily have community centers. So these libraries are we're talking about expanding libraries in Queens at this point.
Really?
Yeah. And they're more than libraries. Remember, libraries have become community centers for local communities. Before we had the Workforce One Center that I got the city to fund at an affordable housing development in Auburn View. The Workforce Center was in the library. Teen Center is going in. I'm building a new library in the Rockaways, for instance. A teen center.
Okay, so we're going to go on. So I got
food pantries are being run. The vaccination sites are being run out of libraries. Libraries are not going to die.
I didn't know Did you know the vaccination sites are being run out of libraries?
Flushing Library just opened. Ozone Park now.
That's awesome. So there's a couple of questions that I want to be responsive to because I think they're important questions, and I'm sure this person appreciates, and hopefully everyone can appreciate why it's an important question. I don't want to get into the embellishment of the media, but instead I can tell everyone where in Queens after COVID, Nancy and I did see a lot of retail mom and pop owned businesses that were owned by Chinese people go out of business. It was really bad. This autistic female, thank you so much for joining us. And what a cute picture. I like the dog. You see that? Can you see the picture?
Oh, yes.
Isn't that cute? Isn't that cute? They caught him in like mid-ground. So what will you do to ensure the safety of the Asian community and also kind of the prosperousness of their business? Because, without getting into, again, the media embellishment of it, we have seen some businesses really suffer because of kind of misconceptions. I mean, there's no way to dispute it. In Queens, there has been a kind of a measurable financial consequence.
Well, let me just say, she would have to give me the geography she's in on specific businesses because there are Asian businesses located all around Queens. And I don't see that happening here, not even in Jamaica as much. In Flushing, I can tell you that, and I was just there today that, the businesses look, they're opening, the foot traffic is picking up again. In terms of keeping, our Asian community safe, just last night, let me just back up because I was doing work on hate crimes before, even we started to see this uptick in hate crimes in the Asian community. Last year, early January, before I left the council, I actually passed a bill along with two of my colleagues which created the Office to Prevent Hate Crimes, which is now fully funded. We just did a town hall last night with the NYPD and pretty much every mayoral agency that responds to hate crimes. We had the Queens DA on as well, Melinda Katz. And then on Monday, we stood with both Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the Asian community and Congresswoman Grace Ming in support of legislation that they're going to pass at the federal level that Chuck is hoping to push through the Senate. It will pass Congress to address some of the challenges we have in prosecuting hate crimes. But the other thing I will say is that we have to support community-based. There's no one solution to resolving hate. You know, some people are born with hate. I talked about today in Flushing, the second pandemic we're facing. That's hate. There's no vaccine that can cure that. There's no Moderna or J&J or Pfizer that can cure what's in people's hearts. So we all have to stand together collectively, Black and brown communities, Asian community, white communities, Jewish communities, and anytime there's an attack on any one of us, we have to continue to send a strong message collectively that this is unacceptable. So
when you look at the numbers, and this is, I'm not sure if you can.
2,000% increase, 2,000% increase right now. A lot of the hate crimes are happening in Manhattan, but a lot of the individuals, and we did a walking tour with the NYPD actually in Flushing the other day. But what we're seeing is a lot of the individuals, for instance, who are encountered, unfortunately, with hate crimes, they live in Queens. When they're in Manhattan, they're being accosted and unfortunately and spit at and hit, and
it's a different
bystander trainings too. We have 2 bystander trainings coming up as well. I think one April 20th.
Okay, we're gonna go on. We got to go on now.
All right. And the next one, I got it. Yeah, because I got to get off by like 9:15 the latest.
That's what everybody says. Okay, but so I will say that Queens is different because what you said is interesting, that they live in Queens, but they're getting assaulted in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Manhattan
That's
is
according to the NYPD. Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's wild, and I hope people can really appreciate that. Isn't that really interesting that Manhattan is no longer, Queens is no longer almost Manhattan. They're completely different personalities at this point.
But I don't want to miscategorize either that we have seen an increase in hate crime.
No, that's understood.
Yeah. But we were at 9 last year. We're at like 15 or 16 this year, which is unacceptable.
There's a lot of tension.
And it's a mix. It's Asian, SWAT stickers.
Hold on. Let's keep going on. We've been very lucky in Queens that we haven't seen a lot of riots and looting. So we've just been very lucky. And I know that
there was none here. There was none here.
Yeah. So is there a plan just going forward and not looking at any events, but is there now a plan knowing that there's vulnerabilities to this? Is there now a plan that communities have worked out that you're familiar with, that what happens if there is this type of intrusion and there is this type of targeted attack?
Even at the height of the protests last summer, we did not. I'm very proud that we did not experience any of that in Queens. And actually, I get a text from the NYPD every morning. Every night, actually, with reporting, so obviously we could just be real here. Everybody was concerned, well, if this verdict doesn't go right, will our stores get burnt out and rioted? And we always separate out the two. People who loot are not people who are looking for justice aren't looking for Nikes. So we always like to make that distinction. And we will always speak out against those who loot, because it takes away from what we're trying to achieve. And this is something you will hear me say, a lot of Black leaders say, when these protests are going on. Those of us looking for justice ain't looking for Nikes. So if you're doing that, you're doing a disservice to someone like George Floyd or Eric Garner.
Let me ask you a question. We
have not experienced that in Queens.
Yeah, no, I realize that, and you're awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask a question, but then there's other questions, and then we'll go, because you're awesome, right? I've kidnapped you. I told Amanda Milius we would go. We did 4.5 hours. I always say we're going to go. We never go.
5-year-old deserves an hour today.
Yeah. But now, is there a plan that retail businesses have? Because now you have to also look at the vulnerabilities, kind of the resiliency of these businesses, that these things can cause interruption. So have you also seen where these little communities are now kind of collectively coming together and form more?
Well, there are bids. I also want to credit that, we did a walking tour, for instance, in Flushing with the NYPD last week. And I was astounded because sometimes, I'll be like, the NYPD is always, sometimes, I don't want to say lies, but they'll say, we're doing everything right. We're talking to all the small business owners. But I want to say that they got it right. That every small business owner that we visited in that neighborhood, they were like, oh, we know the NCO officers. They stopped by. NCOs are neighborhood coordinating officers. And their job is to communicate with the community, with small businesses. And I will say that they've done a great job at that in that particular area. And then in terms of a plan, there's a new plan now as a borough president. I'm proud of this. Whenever there's a change at a precinct with the precinct's leadership, I now will have a say-so in who gets selected as an inspector per se. Not me up by myself, but I get to now appoint 2 or 3 people to a panel that decides who interviews anybody who would get that spot. And one of those individuals will be a business owner. So we're now doing that for the 114th precinct, I think, which is in Jackson Heights. I could have the number wrong. And that's going to be the start of this new process that NYPD does to be more inclusive in selecting their leadership. But having somebody for every precinct this happens in the city, borough presidents will now have to be able to select a business owner to sit at the table. But I will say that the business owners around Queens, whether they're working with the Queens Chamber of Commerce, bids, they really, development corporations, they really do have.
Gotcha. We're going to go on. We got to go on.
Oh,
and I want to respect your time because you said 9:15, and I don't know. We'll try. Okay. So look, Ventana's window. I'm not sure if we respond to this particular question, but clearly they've got an issue that they want to better, wrap themselves around. So I'm not sure if we saw that particular one, but can you help me better understand? So Ventana's window, if everyone recalls, they've got the picture of the nice German Shepherd. Some OZs, help me understand the vernacular.
Opportunity zone.
Some opportunity zones in New York were not well apportioned. Most were, but some places got passed over. Leadership appeal, question mark. So what's the procedure?
So I think they just passed a new bill. They're looking at opportunity zones in the state. I think it's State Senator Michael Giannaris just passed some legislation around this because there were certain communities that were overlooked for these opportunities. So I have not read the bill, so I don't want to lie to you on it. But I know that this is something he was taking a close look at because there were certain communities who were being selected to be in opportunity zones, while there were some other communities that were neglected that should have naturally been an opportunity zone. So I think that was part of the premise of them passing the legislation. I've not looked at the bill yet, but I can tell you that that's something that the state legislature has just moved on.
And then and then they included. So thank you very much. They told me that. It was opportunity zones, and they also I get to look at everything. They also said yes, it was overlooked, and thank me for.
If it's in Queens, just get in touch with us. If it's in Queens, you should get in touch with us.
Yeah, and I also want to be responsive to this because we're going to start winding it up. But so J. Olive 528 asks, is the city in the works to make up a tax incentive for small businesses and citizens? And I will say that I appreciate that you've already kind of responded to that. But if you want to give a kind of a quick summary and how it pertains to you and to Queens, and then I'll also add this. So there's that point, and then I'm going to add to that point. So J. Olive 528 says, is the city in the works to make up a tax incentive for small businesses and citizens? And then Janan kind of contributes to that question because everyone's collaborating. That you cannot compete with better tax zones. So when you're negotiating with businesses to move to Queens, is it just an issue of the tax regime? Or like, what are the issues that you're encountering that are negotiable?
I mean, the best. I mean, look, I don't have much say over tax policy, so I don't have any say on that. I could push for tax incentives, but that's just about it. That's a question more for the state legislature or the city council. But what I will say is that one way I'm able to make some of these things work is through zoning changes. And being that I can shape a project, for instance, we've approved close to 3,000 units of housing in the last month as the borough president. I've only been in a few hundred days. But we're seeing some developers who are like, hey, we want to provide an opportunity for a local small business in that community, perhaps at a more affordable rate. Now, what is that going to cost me? Density. They're going to want more density in some of these to offset some of the amount of the rent that the business owner would have to pay. So I don't have much. I don't have any say on tax incentives and whether that's going to happen. There are some bills at both the city council and state level, and we'll see if they move. I think right now there's a great possibility of thinking outside of the box in a lot of ways because we've just seen like $1 trillion package come through to different states. So even though we had anticipated a $9 billion deficit in the city of New York, that budget deficit was largely wiped out. So we'll see how creative the mayor gets. You might have also saw today that he launched a plan, whether you like him or not, that's besides the point. He launched a $30 million tourism plan, which I think is smart. We're seeing a lot of domestic tourism right now. But the hope is and we are seeing more flights coming into both JFK and LaGuardia now. And I'm hearing that from the Port Authority and also.
So we're gonna go on just a little bit.
Yeah, so hopefully we get back there. But on taxes, I couldn't tell you if they're going to do that. I don't want to lie.
So, and I want to be respectful of your time. And there's a question I'm going to bring up towards the close. But until then, we'll close up in a bit. But until then, can you discuss a little bit of what I see? And I've discussed, I listen in on a lot of what Nancy does, right? Because I'm so fascinated by it's so impressive. I see a lot of people, and if you could just describe the workforce, right, a little bit, I see people that really want to work. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously there's an unemployment thing that's now kind of interfering with people that are kind of already emotionally weak because then they got to balance out. But I do see a lot of people that want to work. And I see a lot of companies that are hiring.
Oh, yeah. We just we do monthly job fairs, and I want to thank Nancy for being a part of those because we've got, I got a nice email last week from a lady who actually was hired off of one of those job fairs who was searching for a long time. So there's a lot of economic opportunity that's coming into Queens. I just closed a deal with Congressmember Gregory Meeks and the mayor to do Terminal 1, for instance, at JFK Airport. That's 20,000 jobs coming into Queens. Today I got a call from the Port Authority. Terminal 4 is going to get the.
So does that mean, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. Does that mean that they're forecasting a huge improvement in a huge increase in tourism and in people flying back and forth again?
Yes, it's gonna. So the anticipation is 2025. We'll see it return to normal levels, but there is a big push to sort of get travel going like now. And we're starting to, like I said, a lot of people, and I sit on now, I just got appointed to sit on the New York City and Companies Board. One of the they do all of these reports, but we're seeing a lot of staycations and domestic tourism happening across New York City. So we need to make sure that we're tapping into that. Our hotels are seeing economic opportunities. People are getting back to Broadway again. I'm going to be investing out of my budget. I have about a $50 million capital budget. We're going to be investing heavily in our cultural institutions because they play a large part of the economy of Queens as well. So it's really trying to make sure all of these strategies are working. But if we can, that's why the vaccine is so important, because if we can get everybody vaccinated as fast as possible, safety is key. Safety is key. If people feel that New York City is safe, then they'll come here. So that's the strategy that we're pushing for. We have to be able to sell New York City again and to let the world know that we're safe.
And we're going to close up with a couple of questions because Interior Foliage, I know that they live nearby, right? And I know that they've got a small business, and they mentioned an interesting thing, and we discussed it, so it should be discussed, right? Is Interior Foliage says, my staff lives in Jamaica, Queens. They don't feel safe walking around. And so we know the legacy of it. And then you also described where it's going. But how do you fix that problem? Like, what is the sequence required to fix that problem?
The pandemic definitely. No one is here to lie and paint this rosy story. The pandemic wiped people out. It really took a lot of the momentum out. But Jamaica is one of those neighborhoods where you're still seeing a lot of economic activity right now, actually. Every day I go there, I'm like, there's a new building coming up. There's new hotels coming up. So this gets back to, like, why are these areas the way they were? You got to look at these were the areas where you did not see a lot of economic opportunity happening. These are the areas where you saw the highest numbers of stop and frisk. So you didn't even have a trust with the community and the police department. And that only hinders public safety, right? So getting back to now moving forward, Jamaica's getting an infusion of cash. I talked about the Cure Violence program in the Rockaways. If you saw me, I was on with the mayor yesterday. You know, he does his town halls. We were talking about many of the programs that we will now be able to invest in. Summer youth. Think about last summer, how there were no jobs for young people. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? Idle time is the devil's playground.
Okay, so we're gonna continue.
Yeah, I know we got to wrap up on this, but we got to get the economy going again. We got to get these young people back into their libraries, into their centers that were closed.
In terms of Jamaica specifically, where there hasn't been a lot of infrastructure, I don't know, I'm assuming, right? Has there been a lot of infrastructure for policing and to kind of improvement? And how, and if there hasn't been, will there now be? Like, what does happen? Because it is booming, but now how do you keep like...
The 103 and the 113 precinct have historically always had challenges with the community, if it's that part of Jamaica. Because Jamaica's big, but I'm assuming they're talking about the 103 and 113. And we did have two gangs who were feuding. I went to a funeral of an 18-year-old young man last summer who was killed, unfortunately, from this community. His mother went to a church. I knew his mom from a church that I often visit over here. So there definitely were a lot of challenges. But I'm happy to say, leading into the summer, God willing, you know, working with the crisis management and cure violence groups that just got a huge infusion of cash that will be able to work with a lot of these gang leaders to really try to ensure that we're putting out those fires before the summer comes. I don't want to say there's an easy fix. We have to make sure that jobs the economy is going. We got to make sure these after school, because the gangs last summer, Adam, just to briefly get on this, the gangs were breeding grounds for young people because there was nothing for them to do. So after a while, they're all hanging out. There's nothing to do. There's not a library, they took the basketball hoops out of the parks. What did you think was going to happen? You know.
So let me ask you a question. Do they do that? Do they do that? Like taking the hoops out and stuff like that? Is that kind of their own?
Because of COVID, because they didn't want young people playing with each other because of COVID, and I got that. But then the big challenge was when they put the basketball courts back, the basketball hoops back up. I had to call the parks department. I'm like, what's taking so long? They didn't do the communities that were the hardest hit. They did every other community before the communities where you really needed to see those basketball hoops go back up, you know, so that these kids had an outlet. But you had a lot of pent up frustration and anger last summer.
Do you worry that unemployment is now total unemployment being $800 or so is now for those people who are emotionally and kind of almost morally challenged, that they don't want to, you know, that they want to take the easy as opposed to, you know, to working. And I only see the people who want to work because I listen to Nancy. So I know the people who want to work, right? But are they going to go back to working, or are the people who are looking for jobs now, who are getting the jobs now, going to lock those other people out of the jobs that they think that they can get once the unemployment? Does that make sense to you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm optimistic about people who might have been knocked out of the workforce getting opportunities, and that's just based on what we're seeing even on the job fairs right now. I think the economy is going to bounce back. Like I said, I mean, we're doing a job fair with Resorts World. I mean, they're opening a brand new hotel. They're looking to hire up. They're bringing back their workers who were laid off, who were furloughed, right? So I think we're starting to see that. I'm not going to lie to you and say this summer everything is going to be back to normal, but we are starting to see the unemployment rate in Queens start to, you know, it's not that it was at 12.9%, I think, in January. We're starting to see the numbers come down. So
So are the people that are getting hired today foreclosing on, if someone's looking for a job today and they're like, listen, I can make this much on unemployment, but I need to work, right? Because I need the reliability of the income. So those people are taking jobs today. Are they going to be locking out the availability for the jobs for those other people who aren't?
People who we need to find. You're talking about, like, say, the person who's in the game, like they're trying to.
No, if a person is getting the people who are getting jobs today, because I hear them applying for the jobs, are those. So, and then there's going to be people in 6 months. Right now, they're on unemployment. 6 months, they're going to be looking for work. Are most of those jobs getting filled quickly? And then in 6 months,
a lot of jobs get filled quickly. I think a lot of jobs, and the problem is there's a lot of demand and not enough supply right now. So of course there's competing interests. But I could tell you, even people who are on unemployment are looking for, they want to get back to work. So that's why I'm hoping, we've done the deal with the mayor on JFK. You're going to see the terminals moving. You're seeing Bartlett Dairy move. You're seeing a lot of construction jobs moving in Queens, right? So there is some optimism and sort of and retail is picking back up now that, as the capacities build up.
High wage jobs? Do you see high wage jobs returning?
It's a yes and no. I mean, I'm just talking to the CEO of JetBlue, and this is why the mayor is signaling also that the city has to get back to work, right? City workers have to get to work is an important signal to it. I know everybody's not in agreement of the timing. The state has a different timeline. But I think us signaling that the city's workforce, 80,000 people next week, May 1st, have to return to work will largely dictate to, the private industry as well, private corporations, that their folks should get back to work too. So
I'm going to show everybody a video. I'm only going to show everybody about 45 seconds of it because I don't want to test people's endurance on this. It's almost like a meditational thing. But this is awesome. I found this on YouTube. Somebody flew a drone over Queens, and you're going to love this. Everyone's going to love this. And I saw my own building in it. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? So watch this.
7 days and 7 hours since I last heard your voice. I know that you felt like you didn't have the choice, and I don't blame you. No, I don't blame you. I know I've been a fool, but baby, believe me when I say to you, change your mind, stay by my side, 'cause baby I need you. Yeah, change your mind, make you stay by my side.
That was cool, right?
Was that you that flew the drone?
Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool?
It's like I did an affordable housing project in the Rockaways, and then the one, I'm not going to disclose which one. And they're like, oh, Joe, we flew a drone over it. And they're like, but it wasn't us, really.
Kidding. I'm not the guy who flies drones. I'm the guy that runs away from drones. So listen, everybody has joined us, and I really appreciate everybody's time. And, I am one of the most optimistic people that there are out there because I see everything, and you see everything that the news doesn't show. Do you know what I mean?
I see where we're going. I see where we're headed. I'm optimistic about where we're headed.
I do also. And I was speaking with your colleague today because, in March of 2020, the stock market was so cheap. And in April, if you believe in tomorrow, your outlook on life is a lot better. And you can kind of better emotionally negotiate kind of like all the daily stresses of media and everything else. So you've been awesome, and I'm so appreciative of your time, and I'm also appreciative of everybody's questions. I thought it was awesome.
Now you got that London pillow, which is in my house in back of you. Are you from London?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
My wife was born in London.
Oh, is she really?
Yeah, she has dual citizenship, by the way.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm not, but I have a little bit of an accent. You know why? Because as a kid, I spent about a year in Edinburgh, and once I had that accent, I can't get rid of it.
Like I met her family after we got married, and I'm like, oh, why do they sound like, I don't know if you ever watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like her dad sound like Jeffrey, her uncle sound like Jeffrey off of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, like this is like the real thing here. It's great.
You are awesome, and I really appreciate everybody's questions, and I also appreciate that everybody had really good questions in these challenging times. It is challenging, and the perception of New York is different than what I experience, and particularly in Queens, it's just a way different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just so appreciative that you were with us, man, and you are awesome.
Thank you. This is great. Have me back in a few months or something. I'll have more good news to talk about.
Okay, so this is what's going to happen. Watch this. I'm going to press the button. It's on the upper right. You can't see the button. You can't see the button. I'm going to press the button. It's on the upper right-hand side. You can't see it, but I'm going to click it. When I click it, everybody's going to go. And I want to thank everybody so much for allowing Donovan and myself to be the guest on your Twitter feed today. So thank you, everybody, so much, and thank you for joining us. And when I press that button, Donovan, everyone's going to go but you. I want you to stay. All right? We're going to gossip now. We're going to gossip. It's going to be a lot of fun. So look, isn't this nice? Look at this. Pizzones, I want to thank you so much. As I've watched all of your scopes, and this was tops. Thank you both. And I appreciate that. So thank you as well. So I'm going to press that button. I'm going to press the button. Nancy's going to get me pizza because I have a ritual with pizza. I'm going to have I do?
You have pizza, I have pizza.
Okay. So then I'm going to press the button. So that's it. Everybody, I want to thank everybody so much for their time. I'm going to press the button. You're going to stay here because you're not used to tech. You're going to stay here. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this. It was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for your questions and allowing Donovan and me to be the guests on your feed.
Thank you.
And I'm going to press the button. I just pressed the button. I got to press it again. Watch this. And bye.